Okay, so a couple disclaimers before we get started. Um, I don't really have any. JK. Actually, though, I don't know where my actual nice mic is. I've been in the process of moving and then moving and then moving. I graduated college back in May, so that was a lot of fun. So that's kind of why I've been moving from location to location with getting a new job and everything over the summer and then into the fall. So as per usual, life is a little odd. Kind of hoping things will steady out and maybe videos might become more regular moving forward. Maybe not up to once a week regular, but who knows? I mean, like, I don't really care at this point. I'm just having fun and making videos whenever I can about stuff, whatever I want to. So today I do want to talk about Octopath Traveler 2. I played the first game, and I even tried attempting a playthrough at one point, a Let's Play, and that just didn't work very well. Well, I mean, it worked fine. Like, the system was great and everything, it's just time got away from me. I almost got about halfway through the main game before I just stopped. I made a video about Octopath Traveler, the first game. I think I made a thoughts and impressions video. I know I definitely made a philosophy video on it that I was actually going to do a part 2 to as well. And I might still do that, actually. And then I made a video about the mobile game, Champions of the Continent, and I talked about the gameplay, and then I wanted to do a separate video about the story and plot, but again, time kind of got away from me last year when the game released. In addition to the fact that the story keeps getting updated, so it didn't really seem all that kind of dire for me to make a story review video when the story was still being added onto. But all that to say, although it was a couple months late, I finally got a hold of Octopath Traveler 2. I started it in the beginning of June, and I just beat it as of a couple days ago, like June 18th, June 17th. Yeah, I actually got the collector's edition. So this thing, super expensive. It was like $200. And I gotta say, not the nicest collector's edition that I've gotten. Like, I've gotten the Kingdom Hearts collector's editions before, Final Fantasy collection editions, the Persona ones as well. And those just tend to be higher quality for cheaper. This is still really pretty, though. It's just, it leaves a little bit to be desired as far as, like, the art book and stuff is concerned. The bust set is nice. And so on. But I'll make a video talking about collector's editions at some point, probably. But yeah, I wanted to talk about Octopath Traveler 2. Now, a lot of this video, I'm going to be referring and comparing the second game to the first. And the way that that's going to look is I'm going to be comparing gameplay elements and story and plot elements. So this is your spoiler warning. I'm going to be talking about all of the chapters in just like, not in order, but just like in vague little bursts. I'm going to be talking about the post-game chapters and everything like that, all the lore secrets, all of it is getting spilt here and now. So, spoiler warning, there you go. We are going to start with gameplay, though. So, gameplay. How does the gameplay compare to the original? Now, I have to say, it has been a while before I played, or since I've played the original game. I, however, do have a friend of mine who has been playing through the original game, and I got to watch him the other week playing it. And there's a handful of quality of life things that the second game has that aren't present in the first, and just comparing them, it's almost night and day. There's a handful of quality of life improvements from the second game that you can't really see the franchise without anymore. The speed up options for cutscenes and for the battle themselves are kind of a must. To the point to where, like, I would when I would realize that my speed up was accidentally off, I needed to turn it back on, just because it's not that the game can be too slow, it's just that with turn-based combat and with all of the effort and detail that's been put into all the character sprites and the particle effects and everything like that, they do take a little bit longer without the speed up option. So having the speed up option still upholds the quality of the sprite work and the animations and everything, but it just gets through them faster. Not that you can't appreciate it all the same. It's just once it goes fast, it's like playing a Pokemon emulator without the speed up option. It's just like, why would you do that? Anyways, so the 8 characters this time, similar to the 8 characters from the first game, all of their names spell out the word Octopath. So in the first game, you had Ophelia, Cyrus, Tressa, Albrecht, Primrose, Alphen, Therion, and Hunnet. And they were the Cleric, Scholar, Merchant, Warrior, Dancer, Apothecary, Thief, and Hunter, respectively. In this game, the order isn't as demanding. In the first game, all of the characters at the very beginning of the game form a circle. And that circle basically has them all in clockwise order of the word Octopath. Ophelia is like at 1 o'clock diameter, and then you go to Cyrus, and then you go to Tressa, and then Albrecht, and then Primrose, and so on. It makes a perfect circle for their first chapters. It's just a nice way to see it all on the screen. The second game doesn't incentivize you in that way anymore. The continent is not a perfect circle, it's just kind of scattered. And so the characters aren't in order. If you want an order, there's actually a couple to go off of. Let me see here. So the order in the game, when you start the game, no. I retract that. In the game menu, there's the journal option. And the journal option will have them in alphabetical order, starting with Ochette, and then I forget who their C1 is. I think it's, I guess it's got to be Casti. And then T, I think, was Therion, or not Therion, I'm sorry, Throne. Yeah, so the journal option on the game has a particular order that they're in. It's Ochette, Casti, I'm pretty sure Throne's next, and then it's Oswald, and so on, right? Well, the Collector's Edition, oddly enough, has its own order that's different than the one in the game. So this one starts with Oswald, Casti, Temenos, Ochette, Particio, Agnia, Throne, Hikari. And so it doesn't matter. But because there's multiple O's and multiple T's in the word Octopath, it's just trying to decide which O goes where and which T goes there, or what O characters, Oswald or Ochette, which T characters, Throne or Temenos, go where. The first game has the same thing, problem, or whatever you want to call it, theme, but the first game solves it by putting all the characters in order at the very beginning. Ophelia is first, and then the first T is Tressa, and then it's Albrecht, and then the last T is Therion. Whatever. So yeah, let's talk about the characters while we're currently doing that. So yeah, this time around you have Ochette, the Hunter, Casti, the Apothecary, Temenos, the Cleric, Oswald, the Scholar, Particio, the Merchant, Agnia, the Dancer. What was the other T? I said Temenos. T. Oh, Throne, the Thief, and Hikari, the Warrior. Those are the same 8 classes from the first game, so it's nice to see the same system and stuff return. There's, just like in the first game, you have 4 boys and 4 girls, so you do the same thing here. What is different is that in the first game, the characters were split up by noble characters and rogue characters. And they all essentially had a couple actions that they could do outside of battle that were the opposite of the other. So, for example, in the first game, Tressa, the Merchant, could buy items from people. However, Therion, the Thief, could steal items from people. The main differences were that the noble path actions either required money or required your party to be of a certain level. The rogue party members were just chance-based, and if you failed, you would have to go to the tavern and restore your reputation. Every time you have to do that, it gets more and more and more expensive. So the second game is a little bit odd. Instead of splitting characters between noble, and rogue, it splits their path actions between night and day. So this effectively means that every character has 2 path actions, one that they can do during the day and one that they can do during the night. Hikari the warrior, for example, he can challenge people during the day. And basically what that does is when you challenge them, you knock them out. So the purpose of that is, like, if an NPC is blocking a door or an alleyway or something that you need to get through, is incarcerate the word? I don't think it is. But you can incapacitate? Is that the word? I don't know. You can knock them out, essentially, in clearing the path. There's a couple other characters that do that as well. Oswald, during the night, I think it's during the night, he can mug people. And that does the same thing, except in addition to clearing the path, he also steals their items. What's the other one? Casti can concoct potions to knock people out as well, or to soothe them, rather. Yeah, but back to Hikari, that's what Hikari's path action is during the day. During the night, he can bribe people for information with money. So you kind of have this weird, pattern that kind of goes on a little bit. It took me ages to figure out what the pattern was and why certain characters could do certain things. So I'm going to pull up a picture here on this screen. Why is it so zoomed in? My lord. Let me see if I can do this. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So this is, I guess, by someone, or this, I don't know who it's made by. I guess you/tiredness. But this is a super helpful chart. There is a couple weird parts about it, though. So first of all, it's split up into 4 columns. You have your gain info path actions, your gain items path action, your recruit ally path actions, and your incapacitate. That was the word. Incapacitate path actions. So your gain info ones, you have 4 of them. You have Casti, the apothecary, who inquires during the day by level. You have Hikari, who gains information by bribing people during the night through money. And then you have Oswald, who scrutinizes during the day on chance-based. And then you have Timonos, who gains information by coercion during the night through combat. Then you have gain items, which is entreat during the night with Agnia, that's level-based. Purchase during the day with Particio with money, that one's pretty easy. Steal during the day is chance-based, and mug during the night is combat-based. Then you have recruit ally. Timonos can guide during the day based on his level. Particio can hire at night through money. Agnia can allure during the day, chance-based. And Ochet can befriend people at night. It says with currency, but it's money is what it is. Let's see. Incapacitate. Throne can ambush people at night based on her level. Casti can soothe people at night with money. Or no, that's medicine. Yep. Ochet can provoke people during the day with combat. And Hikari can challenge people during the day also with combat. The difference between these two, between Ochet and Hikari, is that Ochet, with provoking, she can only use the monsters that she's accumulated throughout your journey. Can only use captured creatures is 2, and only shield break is required is number 1. That's over here for Timonos. So you'll probably also notice that that's how you look at it in columns. If you want to look at it at rows, you have level, 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 level with the top row, currency, 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 currency with the second row. And then you have an extra currency down here with Ochet. And then you have chance, chance, chance. And there's no more chances. And then you have the 4 combat-based ones, 2 of which are incapacitate. And so there's not a combat-based one for recruit ally. You're not going to beat someone up for them to recruit your team, which sounds like something that Hikari could do, especially given his story, which we'll talk about later. So there's 4 level ones, that are all 1 each. They all 1 each fit into a specific category. Then there's 4 combat-based ones, 2 of which fit into Incapacitate, and none of which are in Recruit Ally. Then there's only 3 chance-based options, which are Gain Info, Gain Items, and Recruit Ally. Then there's 5 currency-based options, 2 of which are done to recruit allies. And one of them is money and the other is food. But still, so this is a really weird system to kind of like get a hold of. And honestly, I didn't get it to the point to where I was like, okay, I need this character to do that during this time of day for that specific NPC, until I got to the last chapters of the majority of these characters, which is probably about like 40 hours into the game. This metric is a little confusing, I think, to try and remember, especially because you have, like, so this top row here looks fine. Level, 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 and they all do different things. Perfectly fine. But then, like, the currency, there being 5 of them, 2 of them being the same thing. Chance-based things, only 3 of them existing. And then 4 combat ones, but 2 of them doing Incapacitate. And none of them doing Recruit Ally. It's hard to keep track of. For me, it was at least. Maybe some other people didn't have this problem. But from a gameplay perspective, it was a little frustrating, because when I would change between night and day, which is something that you can do with the click of a button, very helpful, I would always have to make sure that I had the right party members in my party whenever I was trying to do something specific with an NPC. Granted, it's not that difficult. I could look at this chart, or I could just trial and error. It doesn't take all that long to do, but still, just something to talk about. Another thing gameplay-wise to talk about is the latent power abilities. These did not exist in the first game. The first game, the main feature was the BP system, which was every turn you would get what was called one battle point, or BP for short. You accumulate 1 per turn that you do not use them. So for every turn that you don't use a BP, you then get a BP, if that makes sense. You can have up to 5 BP at a time. You can use up to 4 of your BP per turn to increase the potency or range of an attack, which is kind of insane. It was a super cool feature in the first game, especially with the shield system that was incorporated, to where like certain enemies had weaknesses, and if you exploited those weaknesses a certain number of times, then they were incapacitated for a turn. So OctopathTraveler 2 also has that system, but it's also included something called the latent power abilities. So these are things that are unique to each and every individual character. They all do different things. So we'll just start in order of this box here of the list of characters that I have. So starting with Oswald. Oswald's latent power ability takes his spells that would normally affect all enemies, and it increases the potency, it increases the damage output, but it singles it onto one target. This is especially helpful for boss fights where you don't need to be using up all of these spells that are AoEs, essentially. Instead, you can use your latent power ability to target a single foe. Then you have Casty's latent power ability. As the apothecary, Casty is able to concoct medicine or harmful substances in battle. Either she can heal your party or she can damage the opponent with concoctions. The concoction system in this game is much, much, much better than it was in the first. Leagues, by far, leagues better. I'm so glad that they changed it because I could not understand the first one at all. And as I'm saying this, I realize that it's been a while since I've looked at the first game's concoction system, and it might be the same, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Because I remember it being very difficult to understand, and this one was a lot easier. But anyways, Casty's concoction, or Casty's latent power, enables her to concoct without using your materials. So if you... now, that is to say you have to have the item in your bag that you're wanting to use without actually using, right? Like, I just can't, like, you know, pull out an item that I've never had in my bag and concoct with that. It's got to be an item that I have in my bag, but it isn't consumed. by the concoction, if that makes sense. So that's Casti's. Then Timonos. Timonos' latent power was especially helpful and useful at any point in the game. Those shield power points that I was talking about earlier, Timonos' latent power enables you to break shield points regardless if you're actually exploiting a weakness or not. This is exceptionally useful if you pair Timonos with the Scholar ability and you teach him Elemental Barrage, where it attacks a random assortment of enemies on the field, or in battle rather. It can attack, I think 3 to 5 is without using any BP, but if you max boost it with your BP, then it's, I don't know, like 5 to 7. I just realized earlier, I said BP was battle power or battle points. I think it's boost points, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm an idiot. But anyways, that's Timonos' latent power. Ochet's latent power is Animal Instincts, which does 3 things. The first option is that you can have Ochet use a generic AoE physical attack on foes. It's not going to lower shield points, it's not going to deal any extra damage, it's just a hard-hitting AoE. Then she has another move where it does even more damage on a single target. And then she has a third move that lowers the defenses, both physical and elemental, I think, on all enemies, and it lowers their shield points by 1. So that's a good support move for her, because that's just the kind of character threshold that she fits into, is like a shield breaking support character with Lakehold Trap and everything. That's a Chet. And then Partitio's latent power was to give him full BP. So if you don't have any BP, but you have access to his latent power, then just by default, you have maximum BP. You have 5 BP for that turn, which is insanely good for shield breaking, or he's a merchant, so he has access to the hired help skill, which is insanely busted as long as you have money. So that's good. Agnia's latent power enables any single targeting move to affect all enemies. This pairs really well with her support skills like Stimulate. If you make her a Thief, which is a debuffing class, then that works in tandem with moves like Armor Corrosion, or it even works with HP Thief if you're trying to break multiple shields on multiple enemies with a dagger weakness. She, as a dancer, has access to the move Runeous Kick, which lowers all of the enemies' shield points by 1. So if you use her latent power, or no. Runeous Kick only does 1 enemy, but using her latent power, it takes 1 shield point away from all enemies. So her latent power is insanely good. I think it also applies to items, too. Then you have Throne's latent power, which is also pretty good. It gives her a second turn, so once she moves, she'll just go again immediately. That's a really good move. And then you have Hikari's latent power, which is similar to Ochet's in the sense that it gives you extra skills that you can access, but they act a little bit differently. So one of them, I think, is just a general powerful sword attack on a foe. Another is a sword attack on all foes with a polearm attack on all foes, which is really good. Polearm or lance, I use the term interchangeably, or staff and I think stave is the other technical term. And then another move that Hikari uses that you'll probably end up using most is called Pienka. And so this is a 2-hitting sword attack, and it also gives you another turn at the end of the turn. So once everyone in the turn order has gone, then Hikari will go again before the next turn happens. So it's similar to Throne's, but it's a little bit different. It happens at the end of the turn rather than happening instantaneously. So those are their latent powers, but how do they work? So similar to the BP system, they do charge every turn, but they especially charge when you take damage or destroy shields in battle. BPs also do not transfer between battles. So OctopathTraveler has random encounters, like most turn-based RPGs do. And the BP points, the boost points do not transfer from battle to battle. They reset back to 0 at the end and beginning of every battle. The latent powers, though, do, like your HP and SP. They're permanent insofar as, if you use them in one battle, you're going to have to charge it for the next one, and so on. Just like your HP, just like your SP, your special points or magic points, whatever. So yeah, everything else is about the same as far as gameplay is concerned. All of the shield point system and the weaknesses system all work the same. They did change a handful of the abilities from the classes that you play as from the first game. Some of them were buffed and some of them were actually noticeably nerfed. I was kind of surprised to see how many changes were made to the individual classes. So like, for example, the Thief skill in the first game was really insane because it had a move called SP Thief, where you had to use SP to steal SP from enemies. And normally, especially in the later game, you would always steal way more SP than you were actually spending, making the move essentially just free damage for a turn. That move does not exist anymore in any form or fashion in Octopath Traveler 2. Throne does not have access to that skill. Now, there is a secret class in Octopath Traveler 2 that can do something similar for the whole party, but again, it's a secret class. And I guess that's what we can talk about next, is secret classes. So in the first game, there were 4 secret classes. You have your... I actually forgot what the names of them were. So these are secret classes that you can give to your characters. Here we go. Okay. So yeah, so in both Octopath Traveler 1 and Octopath Traveler 2, you can mix and match every character's jobs. So Hikari makes for a really good warrior, but he's even better as a hunter, so you can make him both, right? The same thing happens in the first game, doing that same system, but they have changed that actually a little bit from the first game as well, into the second game. So in the first game, you have 4 more classes, and all of these are locked behind boss fights that you should probably get before you beat the game. So this one is the Sorcerer class. It's basically the same as Scholar, except it's just more powerful. It has access to stronger spells that attack more than one time, and so on. It basically makes the Scholar skill obsolete, though, because this is just, why use Scholar when you can use Sorcerer instead? So Cyrus in the first game would immediately get Sorcerer class because he was a Scholar, so he became a Scholar, a Sorcerer. And then you could take another character like Ophelia in whatever, who already has pretty high magic stats, and make her a Scholar as well. But yeah, so that's Sorcerer class. Then there's the Rune Lord class. I never actually used this as much as I should have. I think it was kind of like a support weaponry class in the sense of like, you could take a particular weapon that's being used in battle and give it an attribute. So like you can make it deal fire damage or thunder damage and so on. It also does BP stuff. It's a little bit weird. It's got SP recovery, which is really good. Here we go. Yeah, activates abilities, adds an extra elemental attack to the end of the character's physical attack. So that was Rune Lord. I never used it a whole lot in the first game. And then you have the Starseer class, and I actually do forget what this one does. I think that this was a buffer, a support skill. Yeah, on buffing multiple allies at once, providing health and BP supplements, and weakening several enemies simultaneously. Hard Worker ability raises the amount of JP, which are job points. Job points are what you use to get the passive secondary skills from every class. But yeah, that's more of like a... I guess we could talk about that too, but it's kind of a little more self-explanatory than some of the other systems we've talked about. And then the Warbringer class. So this is a very melee-focused class where you'll either want to give it to your warrior or your hunter, and it gives them access to all weapon types in the game, which is really good. But yeah, so these don't actually exist in the second game, or they do just differently. So there are 4 secret classes that all do these things. However, they're not all locked behind boss fights, and they're all called something else. So instead of these, we have 4 other ones that are called Inventor, Arms Master, Conjurer, and Arcanist. Okay? And these all do similar things, but we're going to start up here at the top. So this is the Inventor. The Inventor... Oh, wait, no, that was Arms Master. This is Inventor. The Inventor you can get from the very start of the game if you choose Throne A. Otherwise, you'll just have to wait until you get to that part, or you get to that area in the game, which is still really early in the game, before you can get the Inventor class. Now, the Inventor class is a little weird because it acts as a damaging class that breaks shields, that excels at breaking shields, but it's also a support class as well. Now, you don't get the Inventor abilities like you would normally. Normally, to get abilities within a particular job or class, in every battle you accumulate what are called job points, or JP. You can then spend that JP to unlock a new skill. And once you unlock a new skill, the next one gets more expensive, and so on. It costs, I think, about 10,000 JP, or close to like 75,000 JP, 85,000 JP, to get all of the skills of a particular class. And that was also true for the classes in the first game. Although I think in the first game, the secret classes all costed about 2,000 JP for every skill. But yeah, so in this game, unlocking the skills are a little bit different for the secret classes. For Inventor, you'll start off with the Inventor having 2 or 3 skills already unlocked. But how to unlock the other ones, all you have to do is go around the world collecting items. Then you bring them back to the Inventor guy here, and he'll grant you access to those new skills, which is honestly a really cool and clever way to incorporate a little bit of world building into your battle system. So that's really cool. I never did all of these. I did about 2 in addition to the ones that it already gives you. But I've been meaning to go back and do that. So it's really cool. But yeah, it works as both a buffer and debuffer, and it can also break shields pretty well if you boost your moves. So that's Inventor. Then you have Arms Master. This one basically works the same way as the Warbringer. It gives your character, probably either your warrior or your hunter. You can make it anyone else, but those are the 2 characters that are going to make the most of it. Access to all 6 weapon types. Then, if you go collect certain weapons around the world and bring them back to the Arms Master will refine the weapon. If you then equip that weapon to the character with the Arms Master class, you'll get access to the other skills. So normally, this is the class that you'll probably give to Hikari, who's your warrior character. And in this game, you don't really have to worry about getting the other extra abilities with Arms Master, because Hikari... Oh, I forgot to talk about the super specific character abilities. We'll get to that in a minute, but for context in here, Hikari's special super secret ability is that when he beats someone up in combat, Hikari, he can learn the move that they used in battle, which is really, really cool. It's really busted by the end of the game, because you can just get 5 really good abilities from level 10 NPCs. They're just really good moves. Yeah, but anyways. So, yeah, this is what you probably want to give Hikari. It's just a really good physical move. And here we go. So next is Conjurer. So you get this one. You really won't get this one until the very end of the game, because you have to complete Hikari's story in order to do so. And then you have to go through this boss rush tower called the 5-tier tower, which is Enku. By doing it, you get the Conjurer the class. It's kind of that simple. This is the only one I think that's actually locked behind the boss fight. Yeah, it is. It's the only one that's actually locked behind the boss fight. And what's great about it is that it acts as a really good support class, in the sense of you can, for 4 turns, give all of your party members SP regeneration, which is really good. It also has a full revive and full max HP healing move. It nullifies the user for 2 turns, but it heals the entire party, even if they're incapacitated. It just puts them back to full health, which is really insane, especially for the super secret boss fight that's in the game too. But for this one, yeah, each skill costs about 2,000 JP to unlock. This is also the one that's really similar to Rune Lord in the sense of you can add magic attributes to your weapons. So you can make all of your party's attacks do thunder damage, do fire damage, do wind damage, and so on. So it's really good. And then we have the Arcanist. So you won't be able to get this until you at least do Partitio's Sense of Commerce mission, where you get access to the ship. And then you have to go to the Lost Isle, and there's this labyrinth. You don't actually have to go through the labyrinth. You'll find it when you do it. But when you find the secret in the labyrinth, there's an NPC who will just give you the Arcanist class. And so this is the one that's most similar to the Sorcerer, in the sense that it does extra magic damage, and I think it also, let's see, yeah, it does light and dark damage while also restoring HP and SP. It also has tons of skills that extend the duration of buffs and debuffs, and it allows you to extend the duration of buffs indefinitely rather than just a particular turn. So yeah, so these 4 secret skills are really, really good. I'll tell you the order that I put them in. Inventory, I was going to make Agnia. Agnia was going to be the inventor because she has a really, really high speed stat, and if I wanted to break shields or get any good boosts or buffs or debuffs, I could do that pretty easily. I decided not to do this when I did the post-game, simply because I didn't want to have to keep Googling how to get all of the items for the Inventor class, and I found that with her high speed stat, I could just make Agnia a thief, which has access to a lot of debuff skills. I could make her a thief and use her dancer skills for buffs and her thief skills for debuffs. So that just worked out really, really well, especially with Agnia, because I could just I could debuff the entire enemies with her latent power. Yeah, so that's about it. So I never used Inventor really a whole lot. I used it a couple times. Arms Master I gave to Hikari just for like natural buffs. Each class gives you extra stats. So I felt it best to give Hikari Armor Master. It's kind of a no-brainer, especially with his learned skills pairing really well with the Arms Master skills too. Then the Conjurer. I gave Partitio the Conjurer. Partitio and Throne were characters that I didn't really know what to do with as far as their subclasses could be, because they're really versatile, or at least Partitio is. Throne is a little weird. But Partitio could really be any character he wanted to be. I could make him a magic user, I could make him a physical attacker, I could make him a buff or debuff class. So instead I just decided to make him a support class, not necessarily with buffs, but in other methods, right? Like with hired help or sidestep or anything like that. So Conjurer fits that kind of description perfectly, giving SP regen spells to my party members, to applying those elemental weaknesses on your weapons. It just made the most sense to make Partitio the Conjurer for me. So then that leaves the Arcanist, and with this being the one that's closest to Scholar, I just gave it to my Scholar because it increased his elemental and magic stats. It has light and dark spells, which Oswald doesn't have access to normally, so I just gave him that. And then the buffs and debuffs are nice. I think I used them a couple of times, especially with his advanced magic skills and his one true magic skill and so on. It just paired really naturally. So yeah, I had Oswald as Arcanist, Partitio as Conjurer, and Hikari as Arms Master. And then I didn't really use Inventor, but if I did, then I would have given it to Agnia. For the other characters, because I'm going to talk about this real quick, I made, let's see, Casti, I made a Cleric. That just seemed the most natural to me. She reminded me a lot, character-wise, of Ophelia, and so it just felt most natural to make her a Cleric. There were plenty of times while playing Octopath 2 where I actually forgot that she was an apothecary because she's just been a cleric on my party the entire game. Likewise, Timonos being a cleric, I gave him the Scholar skill because that just made the most sense with his latent power and with Elemental Barrage. It was just a no-brainer. So there were multiple points where I forgot that Timonos was the cleric, because I thought that Casti was, because she was the cleric in my party for so long. I forgot that she was an apothecary, and so on. But yeah, so Casti was the cleric, Timonos was the scholar. Ochet, I made a warrior. That just, it worked out best because warrior has, I believe it's the highest attack stat in the game, and her speed is really good too. So giving her more physical attack and defense buffs with the warrior class is just really good. You're not really going to use a whole lot of the warrior skills except Abide, or at least I didn't. Oh, and Brand's Blade, which does a crap ton of damage. Yeah, so making her a warrior just gives her access to 2 more weapons, which is really good because she already has access to bow and axe, and then with sword and the polearm is really good too. So I gave Ochet warrior. Particio, I made conjurer. Agnia, I said before that I made a thief, so she was both a buffer and a debuffer, which was really good. And likewise, Throne, I made a dancer. For the same reason, because she already had debuff skills as a thief, so then I gave her dancer for the buffs, and so on. So that also gave Throne a pretty nice speed stat as well, so she would go first at the majority of turns, or at least in the top 3 of those turns. It also works really well for Throne because of her latent power. She can move twice. So I can spend, I don't know if you all can see, but there's a fly on my screen. So I can move twice in 1 turn. I can break a shield on an enemy with like HP Thief or something, and then I can debuff, so Ochet and Hikari later in the battle can Brand's Blade and deal a crap ton of damage. So that made the most sense to me. Was Oswald as Arcanist, Casti as Cleric, Timonos as Scholar, Ochet as Warrior, Particio as Conjurer, Agnia as Thief, Throne as Dancer, and Hikari as Arms Master. So that is everything to talk about as far as gameplay goes. I don't know how long I've been recording for, but probably too long. I could turn this into a part 2, but I know I won't ever get around to recording it, and it'll just be a larger file, so I'm just going to keep talking about the game. But that's everything I can think of as far as gameplay is concerned. You guys can let me know if there's anything I forgot to touch up on. I guess I can talk briefly on how I think it compares to the original. So, first of all, yeah, Octopath 2 is a lot faster. There's several other speed-up options that you can do. It's just hard to go back to the first game after playing the second one because of these quality of life improvements that are just there, right? Like, you can't, once you have them, you can't imagine the game without them. That's not to say the first game is really, really bad. It's just that game is already 5 years old, and it in some ways it already feels a little dated, like something probably from the early 2010s, which again, not a bad thing. There's plenty of great games from even the 90s that people still play and hold their rightful places in video game Hall of Fame, and I do think Octopath is one of them. But yeah, just quality of life improvements you can't really imagine going back to. Aside from that, the addition to the latent powers is a really, really good addition. It never felt like that I needed to use them in order to like progress through the game. Like the first game, the boost system was enough to break shields, to deal damage, and it still is here. The latent power system doesn't feel like it's trying to take over or replace the boost system. In fact, the two work really well hand in hand. There's some characters I can think of, like Agnia, for example, who can full boost and then use HP Thief or Armor Corrosion or something in addition to her latent power. So whatever single targeting move you're using now becomes an AoE, and if you full boost it, then it either lasts longer or it deals more damage, which is insanely good. And that's true for plenty of other characters. Timonos, it's really good with Casti because you're using her latent power to not consume your concoction materials. And the more you boost, the more concoction materials you can use. So that's just really, really good. Hikari and Ochet, it really just comes down to using your latent power is already kind of like going out for an all-out attack, and then max boosting them is just multiplying the damage output. So those are really good, and I could go on, but I feel like it's kind of obvious. So yeah, the latent power system is really good. The changes that they've made to the abilities and classes, I feel like some of them were really good and some of them they didn't have to do, but I get why they did, like the SP Thief one for Thief. There's a couple other abilities that are missing from the first game that aren't present, and I think some of them were well replaced. Like, Ulbrich had Level Slash in the first game, which was a pretty basic warrior move. It did AoE. It did barely any AoE damage on sword until the late game, where you could like abuse max damage and stuff. But it was an AoE sword attack, and it's absent from the warrior class in this game. Instead, it was replaced with a move called Aggressive Slash that does it hits 3 to 5 times randomly, depending on how much you boost it. 3 to 5 times on random opponents, all for sword damage. So it's equivocal in functionality, especially when you're making like a difference between, you know, are you using this on one boss or one enemy, or are you using this on 4 others, right? So, yeah, you know, some of them were good, some of them were kind of like amp. There are some abilities where in the early game of Octopath 2, you're just like, oh my god, I can't believe they gave me access to this early. This feels too broken. Some of those moves being like Rehabilitate, I think is the name of the move. It's Cassie's healing move. And so she has access to it as a apothecary. It's one of her basic spells. Not only does it heal a party member, but if they're incapacitated, it heals them. It just brings them back to life as well. It's not a large amount of HP, but normally in JRPGs like this, you have an item that revives a party member, and then you have an item or spell that gives them HP. Very rarely are they put into the same thing, and when they are, it's normally like either a really rare item or a high-costing spell. So the fact that they give it to Cassie so pretty early in the game just makes you feel like, oh wow, this is really good. Another move is Runeous Kick with Agnia. It's the move that breaks shield points no matter what. It is remedied by the fact where even if you max boost it, it's not going to break multiple shields. It's just always only going to break one shield. But still. So there's some moves like that that are just like a little like, wow, this seems more busted than it should be, but in practicality, it never felt that way after like the second chapter in the game. I was like, oh, okay. The game is really well balanced as far as its levels and stuff are concerned. You can abuse level ups by the time you finish Partitio's chapter 3 or 4, I think it is. But yeah, so now we're kind of like moving a little bit into story topics and stuff, and so I'll talk about that too. In the first game, all 8 characters had 4 chapters each, totaling up to, what is that, 32? That's 8 times 4, 32 chapters. That's not necessarily true for Octopath 2. In Octopath 2, every character has, like, on average, 4 chapters. So let's look at Oswald, for example. Oswald has a total of 5 chapters, but his first 2 happen back to back. So if you choose Oswald as your primary protagonist at the beginning of the game, you won't be able to access anyone else's stories until you do his chapter 1 and chapter 2. Likewise, when you go around with another character, like I was Hikari, if you're another character and you go to approach Oswald, you won't be able to actually recruit him into your party until you do his chapter 1 and chapter 2 solo. So yeah, every character is a little bit different. Some of them have just chapters 1 through 4. Some of them, like Oswald, have 2 chapters that kind of have to happen together. Some of them have like chapter 2A, chapter 2B, chapter 2C, like Ochet. Ochet has that. And so on. So yeah. So on average, they average about 4 chapters. I think there's 2 characters, Timonos and it might be Caspi, but I don't think it is, where there's no boss fight or anything. It's just like, this chapter is a fetch quest. That's all you have to do. So it's over before it began, really. So yeah, on average, all of the chapters take about an hour to do each, but some are shorter, some are longer, just because of the nature of they're doing 4 on average. So, which is odd, but I like it. So there's that. The other thing I think to talk about is at the very beginning of the first game, whenever you pick your character, let's say Ophelia, right? You pick Ophelia. You do her chapter 1, and then you go around and you collect the other 8 characters, and then you do their chapter 1. So one common critique from the first game was that didn't really narrative-wise, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Because if some of these characters are in the middle of beginning their journey, right? Like, they haven't left their town yet, they're not traveling or anything, why are they joining the party of people that they've randomly met? And furthermore, why are this random band of travelers getting involved in this one particular character's origin story, right? Your party members in the first game are not present during cutscenes of another character. So, like, Cyrus is not present during Ulbrich or Ophelia or Honnet's side quests or stories at all. So it really feels like, in the first game, they're just disconnected. Like, why are these 8 characters coming together and traveling with one another? It's got to be a little more than just, oh, you look like an interesting individual. Want to go on a trip with me? But it's not. I mean, that is how it's set up in the first game. The second game remedies it a little bit. So in the second game, in order to complete a character, or in order to recruit them onto your team, you have the option of doing their chapter 1. And if you do, then they join your team. What this implies is that when you recruit the characters, they've already done their chapter 1s. The game asking you if you want to do them is more of like a flashback sequence kind of deal. These events have already happened. Your random party of travelers isn't going to interfere with the origin chapter of everyone else. So, for example, in Oswald's chapter 1 and 2, he is in prison. Okay, so when you find him, so let's say you're Hikari, because that's who I was. I was Hikari. When you find Oswald, he's passed out in the snow. So he's just like, oh, I'm on a quest for so and so. We should join up. If you want to hear his background story, then you have to play through his background stories, chapter 1 and chapter 2. And while you're doing chapter 1 and chapter 2 with Oswald, you won't have access to the rest of your party. Because it doesn't make any sense for your party to be in prison with Oswald. Another example is actually also Hikari. Hikari's chapter 1, he gets banished from his homeland, and you find him in some random other town. So if you play as Oswald, or if you play as any other character, and you happen across Hikari, you're not going to go back to his hometown and do his chapter 1 again, because he's already been banished by that point in the game. All that said, the game gives you the option to do that. You don't have to go back and do their chapter 1s or whatever chapter is their origin chapter. They can just join your party. I never did that. I always did their chapter 1s. So I don't know the practicality of like what actually happens if you don't do their origin chapters. Like Oswald, for example, if he joins my party, but I don't do his chapter 1 and chapter 2, do I already have access to his chapter 3, or do I just eventually have to go back and do his chapter 1 and 2? Because if I take Oswald in my party, and I get him to level 40, and then I go back and I do his chapter 1s and chapter 2s, before I do like his actual chapters, then he's over leveled, which like I guess could be true for any other character, like even in the first game. Like you can just do their chapter 1s and then level them up to 40, 50 something, and then do their chapter 2s. But normally that's not how it's done. You normally do them all in order, all around the circle. start with one character, you do all the other 7, and then you move on to the equivalent of Chapter 3 next. And then you do all their Chapter 3s, and then you move on to Chapter 4, and then you do all their Chapter 4s, and so on. So, yeah, the second game does a little bit of a better job of making narrative sense of why these characters are together, or how they join together, rather. Because when you join them, in all of their origin stories that they do by themselves, they're all like, okay, yep, I'm going to go on an adventure. Whereas, like, in the first game, not every character was, like, actually going to do that. It was like, yeah, I'm going to screw around and, you know, whatever. But yeah, all the characters, when you find them, they're like, yep, I'm going to travel. Do you want to travel with me? That's also still a little odd. Especially for Oswald and Throne's characters specifically. Oswald just broke out of a prison. Why is he joining a band of random travelers that he's never met before? Like, sure, he could use the extra hands, but still, right? Like, as you play across Oswald's chapter, you learn that he has, because he's broken out of prison, you kind of have to be a little more careful with who you're interacting with and who knows you're alive and stuff. So, it's a little weird for Oswald's character to do that. Likewise with Throne. When I recruited Throne, she was like, hi, I'm Throne. I'm a thief and an assassin. Can I join your crew? It's just like, why would you tell me that, right? Like, it's just a little weird on how you're doing it. Granted, it's much better than the first game. But it's still a little odd narratively. And quite honestly, you almost have to do that with a game of this nature that's trying to do the things that it's doing as far as, like, story-wise goes. Now, in the first game, every now and then, like after a plot point or after a side quest or when you're just strolling in town, the first game would have something prompt up in the top corner of the screen called Travel Banter. And these were non-voice acted dialogue sequences between characters where they would talk about the events that just happened or some random thing, right? And in the first game, that was the only time you ever saw your party members interact with one another, except in battle, of course. But in battle, they don't really do anything aside from just whatever you want them to do, right? They don't feel like a party, they just feel like 4 NPCs that you've gathered and you're forcing to fight. In the second game, however, each character does have their primary stories, but then there's also these 4 side quest sub-stories called Crossed Paths. And they're split up into pairs, right? So you have the Dancer and the Warrior, Hikari and Agnia. They have 2 chapters of Crossed Path together. Then you have Oswald and Portitio, the Merchant and the Scholar. They have 2 chapters of Crossed Path together. Then you have Ochet and Casti, the Hunter and the Apothecary. They also have 2 Crossed Paths together. And then you have Throne and Timonos, the Thief and the Cleric, that also have 2 cross paths together. And in these moments, these are full-fledged chapters. Some of them has boss fights, some of them have fetch quests or whatever else. Some of them you need to do both characters' path actions in order to get along the story, which is super cool. But the characters actually talk. Like, it's all voice acted, it's all like cutscenes, it's a full story. And that's really cool. You get to see them interact with each other and so on. Granted, I almost would have wished that we got another set of crossed path chapters, because there are some characters that I would just really like to see interact, like Ochet and Oswald. Like, Ochet, or Oswald's whole, like, thing of losing his daughter, I think would be kind of an interesting narrative to do with Ochet, because when Ochet is paired with Casti in their crossed path, Ochet kind of adopts Casti as a mother figure. So doing that with Oswald also would have fit into Oswald's story of trying to save his daughter kind of deal. Yeah, so I would have liked to have seen other characters also interact, like Hikari and Timonos, or what else? Casti and Hikari, or Casti and Agnia would have also been really cute. Throne and Agnia would have been good. Oswald and Agnia would have also been really interesting. and so on. So I just wish that there were also like other ways for the characters to communicate. The travel banter feature from the first game does make a return. Non-voice acted dialogue sequences between the characters that normally trigger after side quests, after main stories, after just strolling around in the town. And if you do them, you'll have characters that will respond to the actual events that are happening. And if you pay attention, a couple of these travel banters connect some of the stories together. Like, for example, this is getting into spoiler territory, so if you haven't left already, it's been like an hour. Yeah, so spoiler-wise, Throne's dad, Claude, tries recruiting one of Air's apothecaries to basically join him. And not like the Black Snakes, but just to join him and his evil crew. One of Air's apothecaries does convert, but the other one that Claude was trying to convert was Casti. And so if you have Casti around your party when you're doing Throne's final chapter with her father, Claude, Casti will comment and be like, oh, I remember I either remember him or I remember his name. But the reason it's never came up before is also conveniently Casti has amnesia for 3/4 of her story. But anyways, so yeah, you still have the travel banter feature, and there's actually one travel banter feature after Oswald's chapter 4, I think it is, where if you have Agnia and Casti in your party with Oswald, they're all drinking and they're all having fun, which is also a really cool addition to the travel banter, is not just them talking, but them like having fun and doing things. Oswald gets drunk, and he mistakens Casti for his wife and Agnia for his daughter, which is just really cool. I mean, like, on a level, like, it's a little creepy from, like, a relationship perspective. Anyways, it's cute in the relationships of the game. So, and Casti and Agnia are like, okay, you know, we're not gonna say no to this, because clearly he's going through some trauma, and we want to support and help him. And it's also, like, cute and sad and pitiful and whatever. Like, that's a sweet scene, you know, and you get those kinds of things in the travel banter too, which is really cool. Yeah, so the crossed paths really remedies a lot of the critiques from the first game about the characters not interacting with each other. Granted, that critique still is present in this game, but it's leagues above the first game. Leagues above the first game. Crossed paths, the travel banter, even in battle, your characters will call out one another and say, "That's a good one, Timonos," or "Thanks for the help, Akari," or whatever else, right? They'll do that, which is like really cool. It adds to that relationship and characterizing of the characters that you're playing as. It still doesn't necessarily explain why they're all together, but at least they acknowledge that they're together and they're building relationships as they travel. All that said, we're now getting into the main story, because that was all preliminary stuff. How long have I been going on? Oh, an hour. Cool. Okay. So, let's start. Do I want to start in this order? Oswald? I'll start with Oswald. So, Oswald's story, he's a scholar that has been wrongfully imprisoned for the murder of his wife and daughter. He breaks out of prison 5 years later, and he realizes that his colleague, Harvey, is the one who wrongfully imprisoned him. So, he's basically going on a revenge spree in the first three chapters of his story, hunting down Harvey. In chapter 4, you find out that Harvey has used the remains of Oswald's wife to experiment on and to make monsters from and whatever. So the boss fight for Oswald's chapter 4 is the reanimated remains infused with experimentations of his dead wife, which is really sad. But Oswald kind of rationalizes it by saying, you aren't her. You're just bones and marrow. That's all you are of my wife. You're not actually my wife. But there are a couple moments where the enemy will be like, Oswald, is that you? Kind of like trying to throw Oswald off a little bit. Yeah, and then Oswald's chapter 5 is you actually have to defeat Harvey. And by doing so, you rescue your daughter from the brainwashing that Harvey has done. The reason why Harvey is just hates Oswald is because the two of them are in a long philosophical debate on what was speculated to be the 7th element. You have 6 elements in OctopathTraveler. You have fire, ice, lightning, wind, light, dark. So they were speculating a 7th element, one that doesn't necessarily call to any particular material. It's like the source of the other 6. And so they called this the one true magic. Harvey became obsessed with it to the point to where he would do any and everything to find out what it was and to master it before Oswald. So that led him to human experimentation. It also led him to be recruited by this evil organization that's kind of in the background of the game doing things. And so he's recruited by them to help them out, but ultimately his goal is to just one-up Oswald. So in the fight with Oswald, if you're Oswald, in the fight against Harvey, Harvey does access what is called the one true magic, but he's doing it through artificial means of dark magic and human experimentation and so on. Whereas Oswald has done it genuinely through love, care, and affection. It's just he's accessed that magical faucet within himself, trying to save his daughter. So that's really cool, is you actually get to see a story elements be implemented into gameplay. Like, that becomes a spell Oswald can use from that moment on in the game. He can access the one true magic. And it's not too busted of a spell. Like, you still want to use your other spells and resources and materials. You're not just going to spam this, 7 times in battle, which tends to become the problem whenever you have, a spell like that in JRPGs, where it's just like, oh, this is the magnum opus, this is the deus ex machina of the whole story. Once you access this, you can go back to the very beginning of the game and just kill everything. And like, that's kind of true, but it doesn't wipe out your secret bosses or anything like that. It's really well balanced. So that's Oswald. Next is Casti. Casti's is really good. So Casti wakes up and has amnesia. All she kind of figures out is that she was an apothecary, and that her name was Casti. That's all she kind of remembers or is able to put together. So she ends up going through the continent trying to figure out who she was and recover her memories while also healing people, because she's a traveling apothecary. And it's just like, at that point too, when you're really, really good at something, even if you have some kind of like damage with your nerves or with your brain, your body can still remember those types of traits, and it just does them. So Casti doesn't remember all of the knowledge of being an apothecary, but her body does. And so she'll just be concocting stuff, and she's like, whoa, how do I remember how to do this? So yeah, that's Casti. So for the first couple of chapters, she just helps people in random towns. But then she starts seeing people from her past who are interacting with her and telling her, you've got to remember things, you've got to remember things, you've got to remember things. And throughout the whole time, you're just like, oh, wow, I wonder what kind of happened. And by the time you get to her chapter, I think it's chapter 4 or 5, you realize that those people showing up in Casti's chapters trying to help her aren't real. They're all figments of her imagination, of her psyche telling her that she's got to remember. And when I found that out, my jaw dropped. I was like, holy crap. Because for the first 3 chapters of her story, you're seeing these side characters who are like, I can't tell you what exactly is going on, but you need to, I'm trying to help you, and I was a friend of yours back in the day. Like, let me help you. And so Casti's like, okay, but then they disappear, right? So you think that they're like moving around in secret trying to solve things, but no. The reason they can't tell you what's going on is because they don't know. and they're just trying to get Cassidy to remember something important about who she was, and just about life and whatever before she got amnesia. Come to find out, one of the members of Air's Apothecaries was recruited by this character named Claude, who I mentioned to earlier. Turns out to be Throne's dad. He was recruited and converted by Claude to basically just be evil. There's some like nuanced stuff there, but I'll get into it later. This character's name was Trousseau. And so Trousseau decides to poison the rain. And so the rain came down and it poisoned crops, it poisoned animals, it poisoned the village folk of where Air's apothecaries were at. Cassidy was the only one to survive, but not of her own volition. Like, she gets knocked out, and then her friends are trying, they're like, okay, we're poisoned. She's the most healthy out of all of us. If we can get her out of here before the rain gets to her, maybe she can survive and someone can stop Trousseau. So you find all that out in like her chapter 3. And then chapter 4 is where she actually, or it's chapter 5 maybe, she has to stop Trousseau, which is really cool. What ends up happening is the cure for the rain ends up being the materials you use throughout your other chapters when you're just helping people, which is really cool. Like in chapter 1, the water system in this town is poisoned, and so she finds a concoction to fix the water. Well, that applies to the rain, you know, stuff like that. So, yeah, Cassidy's is just really, really cool, really well developed. I love kind of just the dramatic storytelling that's there. And then what's also really cool is I love the integration of story and gameplay in her chapter, or in her final boss with Trousseau. Because Trousseau's whole thing is summoning this poison rain, right? So in the boss fight with Trousseau, he'll summon the poison rain, and there's no way to stop it. It just happens. And the poison rain, after every turn, will lower your maximum HP. So it's not going to deal damage, it's just going to lower the amount of HP each character has that's available to them whenever they heal, right? So if a character has 3,000 HP, well, next turn it's going to be 2,800. And the next turn it's going to be 2,650. And the next turn it's going to be 2,400, and so on, right? The first time I did that boss fight, one of my characters who had like 2,800 health, 2,800 health, got down to 24 HP. That was their maximum HP, and that was insane. But yeah, so Cassidy's story is really, really good. That's Trousseau. What's next? Temenos. Temenos' story is really good too. So some of like the world building from the first game, and even from this one as well, is you have the Church of the Sacred Flame, which has striking similarities to real-world Catholicism, which I've been wanting to talk about in other videos. So this, at this part in history, is coming upon Industrial Revolution, and they've merged it a little bit still with like early church, or like medieval church times, like from about 700 to 1400 AD. So now you have, in OctopathTraveler 2, you have two new groups within the church. You have the Sanctum Knights, which are the people who kind of do crusade level things. And then you have the Inquisition, or the Inquisitors. And so, like in the Catholic Church, you have the Inquisitors, who basically search out for knowledge, and then they inform and command the Sanctum Knights to police certain things, and so on. So that's the system and structure of the Church of the Sacred Flame in OctopathTraveler 2. So you play as Temenos, who's an Inquisitor. And so he's been referred to as detective a lot of times, just because of the fact that that's kind of what he does. Yeah, so there's a kind of like conspiracy. There's one character, or no. Here's what's going on. In every chapter of Temenos' story, someone is dying. And you kind of need to figure out who is committing these murders and why they're committing them. So come to find out, it's this guy who's a part of a cult, who's killing these people. And he's killing them in backwards order of a scriptural text within the Church of the Sacred Flame. So the Church of the Sacred Flame talks about how people can represent the gods in some sense. Like you have someone who represents the god of dancing, and someone who represents the god of being a warrior and whatever. In a similar notion to how all of the 8 travelers also represent the job classes of each god. Excuse me. But yeah, so this person was killing them backwards. So he started with a priest who represented the Aelfric, who's like the god of the gods, right? He's like the Zeus figure. And then he goes backwards. And so Temenos picks up on the fact that it's a religious, ritualistic murder that he's kind of dealing with. And so for each of his chapters, he's trying to unveil why this person is doing what they're doing, who is imploring them to do what they're doing, because he finds out that this person like isn't too smart enough to do it by their own. And it ends up becoming a whole conspiracy within the church, and multiple people are killing other multiple people within the church to keep it up. So, you know, real world human history. And it ends up being like the leader of the Sanctum Knights, the crusade-like people within the church. And so Temenos has to stop them at the very end of the game. And so at the very end of the game, you know, Temenos is inquisiting. He's like, you know, why are you doing what you're doing? You know, why did you command the deaths of so-and-so? And, you know, yeah. And so the person ends up, you know, being a heretic. And is like, you know, the Church of the Sacred Flame isn't doing what it needs to be doing, not just in like a community sense, but as far as like, you know, in order to make it in this world, you have to be strong and you have to have power, and the church isn't doing that. The church is too soft and too sweet, so we need power. So I uphold to the shadow, which is kind of the opposite of the Sacred Flame type deal. And then so in her lust and search for power, in the very end of the boss fight, she gets consumed by the shadow, and so you have to fight this like evil version, or this like demonic version of her kind of deal. So that's Temenos. You beat her and then you leave. That's Temenos' story. There's some stuff kind of going on there too with something called the Book of Night. That's where a lot of the scripture that's being referred to in his chapters are coming from. And that book plays a semi-significant role in the post-game. Temenos, Ochet. So Ochet is from a small island called Totohaha. And legend has it every 400 years or so, the moon will turn crimson red. And during this time, the lines between the spiritual and the physical worlds thins. And so dark demonic creatures then can plague the land as long as the sun is there. And it's just not good for those kinds of things to happen. Now, the gate for that to happen is on Totohaha, or at least that's where the thinnest line between the two realms is. So it's Ochet's duty, as being trained by the chief of her tribe, it's Ochet's duty to stop what they call the Shadow, or the Night of the Shadow, or the Night of the Blood Moon, whatever it was, but it's all related. So that's Ochet's duty. So Ochet is requested to go get these 3 legendary beasts that are scattered across the world, and to bring them to Totohaha to protect the island. So the first one you find was killed. Like the sacred beast was already destroyed and hunted by someone called the Dark Hunter. But you find the beast's offspring, their child, and so you enlist the child. Then you go get Terra, who's like this fire dragon, and then you go get Glacius, who is this kind of like ice phoenix, ice bird kind of thing, like Articuno kind of deal. And Glacius doesn't like humans because her children were killed also by the Dark Hunter. Or at least I don't remember if the game tells you that or not, but you find that out later at the very least. So you recruit the 3 of them, you go back to Totohaha, and then, yeah, that's what happens. It's the night of the Blood Moon, and all of these shadow demon creatures are coming out of the island, and you're supposed to kill them all. So you do that, and then at the very end, there's one particular animal that Ochet met, I think about 10 years ago, 8 years ago. And that animal was chosen by the chief to be picked for Ochette. So there were 2 animals that you get to pick at the beginning of the game. Mahina, the owl, which is who I picked, and then I don't know the other one. But whoever you pick will be with you for the duration of the game. Whoever you don't pick will be the final boss of Ochette's chapter, which is really cool. So yeah, you beat them, and then the night of the Crimson Moon or whatever is done. And the world and Toto Haha are safe. So then you have Particio. Particio grew up with his dad and his dad's business partner, Rock. His dad, who I'm just going to name Pops and Rock started this, I think it was silver, or a salt, it was either silver or salt, a mining town. And it was very profitable, only for a while. They bought the land from a mysterious person who ended up being Rock. So Rock bought his own land. And the reason he did that was because once the town became profitable enough, he just made the contract for the land in such a way where he could come back and take it at any point he wanted to, which is highly illegal. And it was highly illegal because, like, it was a modified contract that wasn't actually ever in the original contract. But so that's what happens. Rock leaves after a certain date, and the town is just barren. Like, they can't afford anything. The salt isn't worth as much anymore, or silver, or whatever it was that they were mining. It just wasn't worth much anymore. And so everyone there became ill and poor and whatever. And so Particio, at the end of his chapter 1, at this point they don't know that Rock is the one who owned the land. But they know that things got bad after Rock left. So Particio was like, okay, I'm going to go find Rock and we're going to see what we can do. So Particio goes and he leaves, and he does end up finding Rock, who ends up being this, like, huge businessman, capitalist guy who takes advantage of people, and so on. And that's basically the plot. The plot of Particio's story is getting back at Rock. Not in, like, a negative sense. Like, Particio is very hopeful and cheery. He's a very, like, upbeat person. Yeah, so he does that. He ends up getting some business partners. One is the ship that I mentioned earlier. You can outright buy a ship, and then that you can actually use the ship to travel around the world. Again, a really good way of integrating story and gameplay. He helps this person make a gramophone, which is really cool. And then he also gets access to this library that has a bunch of lore-related stuff in the game. So yeah, those are the Sense of Commerce quests. You meet this scrivener, newspaper girl named Ori who follows you around, kind of deal. But yeah, you eventually find Rock, and then you beat him up. And yeah, the biggest thing in Particio's story is the fact that someone that Particio meets, invents the steam engine. And Rock was going to snuff it through a contract, but Particio buys it for 8 billion leaves, which is an absurd amount of money. So Particio doesn't have the money, but he's already signed the contract. So he then goes and enlists the help of someone named Auron, who gives him the money. So then he goes back to Rock, and he's like, yo, I've got your money. And Rock was like, no, you can't do this to me. And then he tries running Particio over with a train. That's Particio's story. Yeah. So then Agnia. Agnia is just a dancer who wants to get better at dancing, and she wants to bring smiles to everyone's face around the world. So she travels and she dances. A couple of chapters in, she ends up in New Delsta, which is like Chicago, New York kind of style. Very metropolitan area. And she helps revitalize life in this bar with this guy who wasn't doing so great. So the bar gets really popular, and the local theater starts losing their business because all of the entertainment is going to this bar, or tavern. So the manager of the theater gets really pissed off, and so tries, destroying the tavern, and once Agnia catches wind of it, Agnia goes and confronts the manager, and then you have to battle the manager. When you beat the manager's best agent, this dancer named Dulcinea, shows up, and she's like, why are you messing with this girl? Leave her alone, and so on. And so the manager is like, oh, okay, boo. Turns out Dulcinea isn't that great of a person. She's very self-centered, self-righteous. And then the other chapters in Agnia's story is dealing with Dulcinea. She tries to outright buy a town, Dulcinea does, just because the town was home to, it was home to where she grew up, and she didn't want anyone to know that. So she tried buying the town to, like, completely redo the town, so there was, like, no trace of people or environment or anything that could trace them to her. Not for any malicious reason, it's just, like, it was a poor town, and she doesn't want people to know that she came from poverty. Yeah, so you stop her doing that, and then there's, like, this dance battle kind of thing, where Dulcinea is having a dance battle with Agnia. And it's technically a fight. Like, you have to fight her, and you have to get rid of her HP, and you're doing it with all of your party members. So, but then in the cutscenes, it's just Agnia and her dancing. Like, they're not fighting. But that was really weird, because, like, are my other party members dancing? Like, that was just a weird thing. But that's Agnia's story. She meets a traveling troupe, or Troupe, whatever the word is, and one of those members in that traveling crew is important for the overall story, but other than that, her and Particcio's story are kind of the least relevant. The relevant one in Particcio's story is Ori, the newspaper girl. She's important, and then the one traveling troupe member from Agnia's story is also important. Then you have Throne, who is wild. Okay, so Throne's story is... there's this thieving guild called the Black Snakes, and that Throne has been involved in since birth. The Black Snakes are led by two individuals named Father and Mother. And they're not actually the moms and dads of people there, and nor are they married or anything. That's just what they're called because they helped raise the new recruits and stuff. Through abuse and manipulation and everything else. Like, they weren't good parents, or they're just not good people. But Throne wants out. Throne wants freedom. And everyone else around her wants the same thing, but they think that it has to be done out of survival of the fittest. Like, all of her childhood friends that she grew up within the Black Snakes, when the time comes, they want to kill Throne because they're promised and guaranteed freedom if they do so. And so Throne beats them all. She makes it through the ranks. And then eventually you need to kill Mother and Father. When you do, you find out information about Throne's actual mom and dad. Come to find out, at the very end of the whole thing, Throne's actual biological birth father is this guy named Claude, who has lived for hundreds of years because he has the blood of a powerful sorcerer named Darkest, and he's got, like, demon god blood in him or something. I don't know, it's weird. But he's basically eternally young. He's not immortal, he's just eternally young. So Throne kills him. Like, that's the end of Throne's chapter. It is really cool, though. Yeah, that was just weird, because that part wasn't explained when you had to fight Claude. He was just like, yep, I'm young forever. But another thing is that because he's young forever, he has a crap ton of kids, and you find out the reason why. But he just... I'm pretty sure it's implied that he rapes a handful of women, none of which that you see, none of the characters are implied to be raped, but it is implied that he does rape some people. And a lot of characters in Throne's story happen to also be offspring, making Throne half-sisters, or half-siblings, with almost half the people in her story. The mother character is also Throne's half-sister. Some of, like, the childhood friends that Throne had were her half-siblings. And so on. It also explains why you'll find a handful of NPCs around the world who just all kind of look like Claude. And that's the reason. Is because they're Claude's kids, whether they know it or not. Yeah, so Claude also is the one who recruits Trousseau from Cassie's story. Anyways, so then our last story is Hikari. So Hikari is he's a half-blood prince from the land of Ku. His older brother Mugen technically has the rights to the throne, but the king can change that, obviously. So the king on his deathbed decrees the change. Decrees that, okay, Hikari is going to be the one to take the throne because he has a pure heart. Mugen, which is the older brother, Mugen is horrible and he's just got a heart for bloodlust. We do not want him to take the throne. Well, he gets assassinated because obviously by Mugen. And then Mugen then banishes Hikari and lies and tells everyone that Hikari is the one who killed their dad. So Hikari is banished, and he's trying to find a way back home to reclaim the throne. So this is over the span of a couple years, but Throne, or that whole background story was. So now, Throne's Chapter 2 and onwards. Oh well. Throne's Chapter 2 and onwards is about, let's see, is about gathering old friends to reclaim the throne. So one of them being Kazan, who is a heavy drinker and a gambling man, but he is a military tactician. Another is Rai Mei, who's just really, really good with a spear, and she can call lightning, and so on. So those are kind of Hikari's chapters, and it ends with you having to kill the older brother, Mugen. Similar to the final boss from Timonos' chapter, Mugen also becomes overwhelmed with the shadow within him, and is consumed, and you have to kill this like demon form of Mugen. Yeah, so that's all of the individual chapters. I'm going to check this text real quick. Oh, okay. That's all the individual chapters of all the individual characters. It took me forever to figure out how they overlap. So I'm going to draw your attention to this screen right here. So I'm going to read this off because this person here, Schnoz the Wise, which is a pretty funny name. Schnoz the Wise put together what he thinks is like how all of the characters and all the stories interlap. So I would like to compare this to the first game, but I've already been recording for an hour and 30 minutes. So we're going to do this, and we're going to call it the video, and I'll tell you what my thoughts about this are too. So yeah, here's obvious spoiler warnings. Blah, 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 blah. So how each Traveler story is linked to the final chapter. So starting with Ochette. The link in her story is the Dark Hunter, who is revealed to have orchestrated hunting parties on the legendary beasts. The Dark Hunter also created Ochette's final boss, though this is not revealed until the final post-game side chapter. Casti. Trousseau is actually influenced by the Moonshade Order, which is the cult group that Timonos has to deal with, to bring people their quote-unquote salvation from suffering. At some point, Trousseau probably thought being an apothecary was a pointless endeavor, because although apothecaries could temporarily relieve suffering, patients would still get sick, be in pain, and die. He saw this happen countless times. Trousseau was given the Book of Night by Claude, Throne's dad, which changed his heart. He realized what the book said was true. According to this journal fragment that you can find, it seems that Claude was hoping to also persuade Casti, who was accompanying Trousseau as they were collecting herbs near Lost Sea. But Claude failed to do so. And then, this person talks about how Casti never remembers it, but she does during a travel banter. Yep. Anyways, Trousseau decided the best way by ending people's suffering was by just killing them. Trousseau might have been an active member of the Moonshade Order, but at the very least, the Moonshade Order influenced his actions. So next, Throne. Here we go. Claude, Throne's dad, is related to Darkest, the powerful sorcerer. I don't actually know anything about this guy. But Claude is related to Darkest, and he also received Vide, which is a demon god. he also received V-Day's blood in the womb. So, like, while he was in his mom's womb, while he was being born, he already has the powerful, like, ancestry from Darkest. But now he's been infused with a demon god's blood, right? So that gives him immortality. Not really, it just eternal youth. Having both of their bloods, Claude was the perfect candidate for the vessel for V-Day, because the demon god wants to come back, right? However, he didn't want to. So instead, he was wanting a worthy candidate to replace him. So that's why he has a whole bunch of kids. It's because since he has the blood of V-Day and Darkest, so will all of his kids. So he essentially has all of these kids trying to find a suitable vessel. Which is why there's so many people who look like him, and why the majority of them are all in the Black Snakes, because that's what Mother and Father were also subsequently trying to do, trying to find a successor for Claude, whether they knew it or not. But that was it. So, hence the whole shenanigans with the Black Snakes. Throne is his worthy replacement. However, regardless, the Moonshade Order doesn't really care who it is, just as long as they get their vessel via Claude or his worthy candidate. So Throne is the worthy candidate because she's the one who rises through the ranks, kills Mother and Father, and kills Claude. But being the vessel is something that you have to choose to do, and Throne just doesn't choose to do that for obvious reasons. So, Oswald. Harvey is determined to beat Oswald in an intellectual battle by discovering the one true magic. The Moonshade Order helps Harvey in exchange for completing the Book of Demons. With the help of the Moonshade Order, through materials in the book imbued with Darkest's DNA, his skin is the leather for the book, and pure blood from a certain lineage, which were Oswald's wife and daughter, Harvey believes that he's discovered how to access the one true magic. Even better, the necessary lineage blood is linked to Oswald's wife and daughter. Perfecting the formula, Harvey is able to unleash the one true magic on Oswald, yet Oswald also summons the power of one true magic through friendship, love, main character power. They each have a different formula, so now in Harvey's eyes, whoever defeats the other has the true one true magic. The one thing that Harvey didn't consider is that not only does 2 plus 2 equal 4, but so does 3 plus 1. Boom. So, yeah. Partitio. Ori is the scrivener, whatever, the newspaper girl, that meets Partitio. Her relationship to the Moonshade Order is unbeknownst to the player until the final chapter. Looking back at some of the scenes, like in the Industrial Revolution cutscene, Ori asks if her brother is watching, referring to Aboro, who is Kazan from Hikari's story. And then also says, Partitio spoke hopefully about a bright future, though I found it difficult to believe him at first. First-time players probably won't pick up on it, but she points out to her brother in multiple cutscenes. Yeah. So Agnia. At first glance, there seems to be no connection. However, the connection is the character Tansy from the Traveling Troupe. So, although it feels like a last-minute addition to the story, like the developers realized that Agnia's story isn't referenced in the final chapter, so they shoehorned something in. So her use of goddess, I don't know what this means, maybe like a word that she says regularly, might actually be referring to Arcanet, because this is really important, as she uses it quite a bit. So I do kind of have to explain this before I continue. Arcanet is a character who is pulling the strings trying to bring V-Day back to life, or just trying to bring V-Day into the world. And she converts Tansy. So Tansy is full on in love with her. Tansy's husband dies, and then Tansy finds that same emotion in worshiping Arcanet. So yeah, that's the connection here. Is Tansy is a servant of Arcanet, essentially. Timonos, Mint, the character Mint, is Arcanet. There might be a few moments where you can see Mint act suspiciously during a second playthrough. I never caught it during the first playthrough. I just thought it was playful banter. Case in point, Timonos' cutscene. Timonos and the children, she quotes some text saying, "We are all born with shadow inside of us," which, knowing my theology history, I thought she was like equivalating theology to the original sin concept from Augustine. But anyways, yeah, I just thought that it was really cool that like a church person would actually say that, because church people do say that in real life. Admittedly, it's a weak clue. I'm not really sure why she said it, other than to point to her involvement in the Moonshade Order. It's clear that they were planning Mint to have a big role in the final chapter, compared to Tansy. Hikari. Kazan is a Boro. Hikari mentions either during one of his story cutscenes or travel banter, can't remember which, being worried if Kazan was ever on the opposing side. So Hikari does make... It is travel banter, I think it is. Where after Kazan gets an army for Hikari, Hikari in travel banter says, yeah, like, you know, sometimes I worry if he's on the bad side because, like, he's such a really good tactician. It's said in hyperbole of bitter irony kind of deal. Like, I'm glad he's on our side because we'd be screwed. Wouldn't you know? Yeah, but anyways, after Hikari defeats Mugen, Hikari leaves the throne room, leaving Kazan alone with the Darkblood sword, which they need, I guess. And then the scene fades to black. When OP first saw this, he was sure that Kazan was going to betray Hikari. He was half right, and so on. So then we have the crossed paths. So each of these stories kind of allude to the final chapter. Oswald and Porticio learn that nighttime is strangely growing longer, which is really cool. Casti, and I'm pretty sure too, at that point in the game, because you can change between day and night, I'm pretty sure that nighttime does actually get longer, and that your days are shorter. I'm fairly certain, because it always felt that way. Casti and Ochette fight a powerful Shadow Beast, which confirms an emergence of Shadow Beast is caused by the Moonshade Order. Those random encounters at night with terrifying Shadow Beasts are the result of that. Timonos and Throne learn of a faction of people trying to stop the events of the Moonshade Order, or to reverse the effects. It was a little weird. Alpatis, who is a woman that Throne and Timonos meet, is a member of the people trying to stop the Moonshade Order, and she has like a pure bloodline. The same pure bloodline that Oswald's wife and daughter are with. But she gets murdered, and she gives Timonos and Throne a piece of a magical mirror, and they don't know what it's for yet, but they know it's important because she risked her life for it. Yeah, so Apaltes is killed, and then she gives the mirror to Timonos and Throne in case she became incapacitated. And then lastly, Hikari and Agnia's story wasn't really about anything in particular, aside to show that there were people who were in despair, and suffering is a part of life. There can still be joy and remembrance. And this is really important, because the Moonshade Order, their whole deal is that they want to cause eternal night, because they don't see hope in life. They don't. They're like, there's always going to be pain. There's always going to be suffering. So we're just going to, by causing an eternal night, and by reviving V-Day, V-Day will obliterate everything. We'll just completely reset the world in darkness, because there's no point to life, there's no point in light, there's no point for a dawn. So Hikari and Agnia's story is about a particular character who is suffering the loss of their sister. And so much so that they're very bitter. Some of it involves Hikari's family and just the nation of Ku and what they've done, with their history being covered in crimson red. And so Hikari and Agnia try showing her that, yeah, like, we're really sorry about your sister, and that life sucks. Like, life will be horrible. So, but suffering is a part of life, you know? Like, there's still joy and there's still remembrance in those things. So, lore-wise, it isn't related. It's about the themes and the thematic about it. So, as a reminder, Kazan from Hikari's story is Aboro, and Mint from Timonos' story is Arcanet. So, here's the Moonshade Order, and here's what each individual member is doing, okay? And there's actually something important about the Moonshade Order. It's not actually important, it's just I'm a nerd. That OP here didn't notice, but I did. And I'm going to tell you all after I read this. So here's how each member of the Moonshade Order want to see the end of the world. So this person isn't counting Claude, but they should. They're also now not counting Harvey or Caldina. I would count Harvey. I don't think you need to include Caldina, because Caldina is just a pawn for Arcanet. Harvey and Claude are their own being. Like, they're doing their own things. Caldina is being used by Arcanet. She's a pawn. So, but here we go. Arcanet seems to be the leader of the Moonshade Order, though she sees her as being on equal footing with Oboro, which is fine. Oboro and Ori are kind of doing their own things. Like, they're a part of the Moonshade Order, but they joined. Like, they weren't raised in it, indoctrinated by it. They were kind of like, yeah, life sucks, we'll join you. Arcanet seems to be immortal, although you're able to kill her, and I killed her pretty easily. While the massacre of the Cow people took place 30 years ago, which is memories from a massacre cutscene. So the Cow people is Oboro and Ori's family. And it's a nation that's... oh wait, no, I think I'm thinking of something else. Yeah, no, I'm thinking of this down here. We'll get to it. Anyways, I forget about the Cow people. While the massacre of the Cow people took place 30 years ago, the origin of the Order is older than that. Oh, okay, so that's about the origin of the Moonshade Order. And Arcanet appears to be so young. I've been talking straight for almost 2 hours. Her motivation is a little unclear if she read the Book of Night and was stirred by its contents, or if she naturally came to hate life. She's just the organizer. Like, she wasn't all that powerful. She just put people together and told people what to do. That was what she did. Perhaps she had an encounter with Claude, who more or less inspired her. Regardless, she wants the end of Dawn to take place. She has some similarities to the character LeBlanc from the first game, who's also an evil person who wants to resurrect an evil god. So then we have Tansy. Tansy is the director and writer of the Traveling Troupe. Her husband dies, and it kind of sends her artistry into disarray. Like, she's writing all these plays and stuff, and they're all really good, but she doesn't think they are, because she's kind of, like, lost her will or reason to do so. Odner is her husband's name. So, she ends up running into and falling in love with Mint, who is secretly Arcanet. She even has journal entries where Tansy says, "One day, my feelings for Odner disappeared, and all that was left was her." So she is, like, worshipping in love with Arcanet. Like, even in the cutscenes, it's really obvious. Like, I think some people are like, oh, she just means worshipping, and she's psychotic. No, she is romantically and sexually into her. Like, that's very obvious. And it is that, like, kinky worship bit, too. Yeah. But anyways, so Arcanet, in order to revive the evil god, you have to make blood sacrifices to get rid of the 4 sacred flames. And by doing that, Arcanet kills Tansy. And so that's one of the sacrifices. Okay? So, then you have Petrichor, who is the Dark Hunter. Petrichor met Arcanet when she was younger, swearing her loyalty to Arcanet. So she's just kind of like... she's just there. She's also working for Arcanet for some reason. We don't really know. She likely isn't oblivious to the Moonshade Order's ultimate plan like Tansy was, as she's willing to sacrifice herself to douse the sacred flame. It is unclear if she read the book or if Arcanet just convinced her, right? I feel like there has to be an NPC who is secretly Petrichor. Yeah. So Petrichor is just kind of an evil hunter who works for Arcanet. There isn't a whole lot of other info there. And then we have Oboro and Ori. They were both members of the Kingdom U, who were brutally beaten by the Kingdom Ku. In a desperate attempt to stop the bloodshed, they tried to kill King Jigo, which is Hikari's dad, but they failed. Instead of killing them, Jigo offers Oboro to serve Ku. He agrees, hoping to end all of the bloodshed. So that's Kazan. He can't, and through all of it, Oboro and Ori decide that it is in humans' nature to steal and kill. Because of this, they believe that humans don't deserve to see the dawn of a new day. It seems like Oboro is suspicious of Arcanet, so Oboro and Ori may not be officially members of the Moonshade Order, but they ally with them to see the common goal of ending humanity. Interestingly, the Book of Night does not persuade them, as they have already come to the same conclusion of night should be eternal. A lot of the dialogue that Oboro and Ori have, where they're talking about humans being evil, implies that they're not human. Like, it's not the same thing as like Eren Yeager being like, humanity is evil. Like, these people genuinely seem to be something other than human. But maybe I'm wrong. Okay, so that's how everything ties in, and those are all the characters that we're dealing with. So what is the plan, right? The Moonshade Order. Finally, we can all talk about how it comes together. In order for Eternal Night to fall, for V-Day to be revived, the Moonshade Order needs a few pieces to collect. They need the fully completed Book of Night and the fully completed Book of Demons to combine to form the Dark Blood Grimoire, which I'm pretty sure was also in the first game. Maybe not. Okay. Nope, it wasn't. I thought it was, but it wasn't. But so, yeah, they want to combine the Dark Blood Grimoire. They also need the Dark Blood bow, sword, and staff. I don't know why. This says it needs to be done to douse the sacred flames, which makes sense because there's 4 flames, but one of them is the one in Flame's Grace. So the other 3 seemingly need to be used to douse the other ones. So, I guess the blood sacrifice that you do has to be with those weapons. But I guess, okay, so Arcanet kills Tansy, which could be with the staff, right? And then Kazan takes the sword, and Ori kills herself with a sword, seemingly this sword. I don't get the bow, because the Dark Hunter would be the one with the bow, but the Dark Hunter's blood is spilt because of the giant's animal demon thing that she abused for years, right? Like, she didn't die with the bow, nor did she kill someone with it either. The monster killed her, which was intentional. So I don't know why they needed the weapons, but they got the weapons. Interestingly enough, when I realized that there was a Darkblood sword that Kazan had, Darkblood staff that Mint had, and the Darkblood bow that the Petrichor, the hunter, had, the thought came in my mind of, what if there are evil counterparts to the Travelers, right? Because Kazan has the sword, and the sword is a weapon that's used mostly by the warrior, which Kazan was in Hikari's story. Mint uses the staff, or the stave, which is what Temenos used. The bow is what Ochette uses, which is what the Dark Hunter uses too, right? So you can see the parallels here. So I thought to myself, I was like, oh, what if there's evil counterparts to the Travelers, right? I was half right. And OP didn't realize it here, I don't think. Nope, OP never realized it. So I'm going to talk about it when I get to the end. So, but here we go. A sacrifice to douse the 4 blue sacred flames scattered around the world, sealing away V-Day. Finally, they need a vessel for V-Day. Claude's worthy vessel, or himself as a backup, although it doesn't seem like that it had to be one of them, as we'll see later. Oboro is the one who sacrifices himself to become the vessel for V-Day. But Oboro doesn't necessarily seem to have the blood of Darkest and V-Day within him, so him being the vessel is a little odd, right? So, it's unclear which of the members first had the uncompleted Book of Night. I would like to say Claude makes the most sense. He probably had the beginnings of the Book of Demons as well, as he himself gives the Book of Night to Trousseau and to Oboro. Likely at that point, where Oboro, Ori, Arcanet, and Claude all team up, they use the Book of Night as they see fit, since Arcanet gives it to Tansy to read, and Harvey reads it through the Moonshade Order. Even though Ori didn't think that it was necessary for Harvey to have it, they just did. So each member, there's 8 members. That's important. There's 8 members. They all have an important task within the group. So Arcanet tasked Tansy to find the 4 sacred flames around the world, and she did. The game explicitly states that she found the one in Totohaha, and it's pretty possible that she found the other 2 as well, with the one at Flames Church being common knowledge. Tansy is also used as the sacrifice for the one in Flames Church. Petrichor is given a few tasks: hunting the legendary beasts so that the Night of the Scarlet Moon goes without a hitch. Furthering the success, she uses Ochet's unclaimed animal as the catalyst, abusing it under Harvey's experiments. She is also tasked with hunting down Roy, the Inquisitor friend of Timonos, who found the Darkblood bow. I did forget that the bow was in Timonos' story. Roy goes into hiding, but Petrichor still finds him and kills him. I think that was the second person that's dead in Timonos' story. It was Roy. She also might have been the one to kill Alpates, which is in the crossed paths with Timonos and Throne. Finally, she sacrifices herself to douse the flame in Totohaha. Caldina. This character is not relevant, really, because she's just working for Arcanet. But here's what she's doing. Caldina is the leader of the Sanctum Knights. She is manipulated into recovering the lost pages of the Book of Night. She is given the Book of Night to do so, but also orders Vados, which is just some murder guy, to recover other pages from people who have them. She is given a right by Arcanet that is purposefully flawed, so that the completed Book of Night can be retrieved by the Moonshade Order without a problem. OP understands that Arcanet put things in motions for Caldina to complete the book without the trail being traceable to herself, to Arcanet. As in, she placed the ritual somewhere where Caldina would find it. So, Ori admits that in Journal Entry 15, neither Oboro nor Claude know how to complete the Book of Demons, so they make a deal with Harvey. Oboro understands that the remains of Darkest himself are needed. Harvey works on completing the book, hoping this will yield the secret to the One True Magic. He realizes that either the One True Magic, the book, or both require Elena's blood, as she has Lumina blood in her. I think this is like, I don't know what Lumina blood is. Like, Lumina is light, so I assume like she's a descendant from Elfric, maybe? But a trait shared with Apaltes, by the way. Hence why Harvey frames Oswald for killing his family. Harvey begins experiments, which are also used amongst the members of the Order, like Petrichor. He bribes Oswald to be sentenced to imprisonment for life rather than death, because Petrichor was just like, let me just kill Oswald, like, let's get rid of all the witnesses. And Harvey's like, nope, I need him alive. I need him alive. Why? Because Harvey is delighted to hear Oswald's escape in prison, as he will finally one-up Oswald in the one true battle. This concerns Ori, but Oboro assures her, which is Kazan. Oboro says that it'll all work out. It doesn't. So their battle determines Oswald the winner, though the Moonshade Order still gets what they want, because Harvey completed the Book of Demons. Claude plans an elaborate game to determine a worthy vessel for V-Day. Even though he could be the vessel himself, he just doesn't want to be. Again, the Moonshade Order doesn't care as long as they get their vessel. While Claude hunts for a vessel, he helps pull strings and the like for the rest of the Order. He comes into possession of the Darkblood Staff through Marionette, but it's actually Throne. Throne, okay, so Father tells Throne to go get the staff. She gets the staff. Throne then gives the staff to Father. Father then gives it to someone else, who gives it to Claude, who gives it to Arcanet. So a lot of tossing potatoes going on here. So here we go. Throne stole it, handing it to Father, who gave it to Claude, who gave it to Ori, who gave it to Arcanet. That's what it was. So, Arcanet pulls a lot of the strings as seen above. She is in possession of the Darkblood Staff. She orders Tansy and Petrichor around and performs the sacrificial dousing ritual in Flames Church using Tansy. Ori, which is the newspaper lady from Partitio's story, is basically the messenger and deliverer of important items. She swoops in and takes the completed Book of Night and completed Book of Demons after Caldina and Timonos' fight and Harvey and Oswald's fight, respectively, combining them to create the Dark Blood Grimoire. She also delivers messages to the members. She kept a close eye on most of the travelers as well, namely Partitio, Oswald, and Timonos, but she also comes across Caskey. I did notice in Caskey's last chapter, when you save everyone from the evil poison rain, Ori is there, and Ori is like, oh my gosh, hi! I just thought it was cool. I didn't realize that it was because she's keeping tabs on people. Yep. She is under the same assumption as Oboro that humans are greedy, destructive, and bloodthirsty. She sacrifices herself for the dousing of the flame in the wildlands. Yet Partitio stumps her, so much so that she seems to redeem herself, or her resolve, that maybe the world isn't not as hopeless as she once thought. So she does kill herself for the flame, but she doesn't fully kill herself. Like, maybe it's just blood. Like, maybe you don't have to actually kill yourself. Maybe blood just has to be spilled. Because she's still alive at the end of the game. Oboro pulls a lot of the strings as well, orchestrating many events as well as predicting some of those loose associates' actions like with Harvey. Oboro's main concern is acquiring the Dark Blood sword that Mugen wielded until his death. In order to do so, he plans Mugen's rise to power in Ku, noted by Agiha in Memories of the Flame, then leaving Ku for Hikari to come recruit him for Hikari's cause. So rather than just Kazan being and working for Mugen, I guess it was because Mugen was attached to the sword, like, not physically, just like it was his sword kind of deal. So he needed Hikari to get the sword away from him by killing him, kind of deal. So I guess that's the idea. Then leaving Ku for Hikari to come recruit him for Hikari's cause. When Hikari goes to find Raimei, he gets captured and planned for execution. Oboro tries to have Ori deliver a letter to her starting not to. I don't know what that means. Oboro needs Hikari to kill Mugen so Oboro can steal the Dark Blood sword. It seems complicated, but OP thinks that Oboro does not want to do it himself to avoid a tough battle against Mugen. Which also makes me think that Oboro is still mortal or human, because, like, if he was some kind of, like, demigod or something, he could just stop Mugen, I would think. So, yeah, and then Kazan kills Agiha to douse the flame in this area here that I can't pronounce. So, with their plans finalized, the Sacred Flames can no longer seal the Isle of Vidania where Vide rests. Oboro sacrifices himself to resurrect Vide, which is weird because that's the whole reason Claude was having a bunch of kids, was to find a vessel. But I guess Oboro could have been one all along. So I don't think it's a plot hole like OP says here. I just think that we don't have enough information about the rituals that are happening, right? So here's a short version of the events. The events of most of the Traveler stories take place because of the Moonshade Order's plan for Eternal Night. So in Timonos' story is about getting the completed Book of Night and learns that Roy has the Dark Blood bow, later killed by Petrichor, right? Oswald's story is about the Book of Demons. Hikari's story is about the Dark Blood sword. Throne's story is about Claude and his mission of finding a successor. Casty's story is just about Trousseau. It is just about seeing how the effects of Claude and the Moonshade Order can affect other people. So Trousseau. Ochet's story is about how the Night of the Scarlet Moon causes more suffering for people. And a lot of it is the result of the Hunter as well, of the Dark Hunter as well. So it's just, yeah. Partitio and Agnia's stories don't really do anything in and of themselves. It's the side characters that are relevant. It's Tansy, the playwriter, in Agnia's story, and it's Ori, the newspaper girl from Partitio's story. So, the Moonshade Order does accomplish their goal. However, the Travelers stop Vide from leaving Vidania, bringing forth a new dawn. So, one other thing to note about Arcanet is that she recalls being stopped, or like other travelers from before stopping Dawn from happening or whatever, which makes me think that she's referring to events from the first game, because the first game seems to happen years, like hundreds of years before Octopath 2, right? So this seems to be a true sequel. Well, I was reading some other thing, and it was talking about how Octopath Traveler 2 could actually be a prequel, but there are some things that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, like the technology that's invented just doesn't exist in the first game, and so on. So, yeah, there's a handful of things that just don't make sense if you try and do... Oh, actually, here they are. 7 things only players of the first game noticed. So, here we go. Mick and Mac. Mick and Mac. So, in the first game, in Tress's Chapter 1, you have to fight 2 pirates called Mick and Mac. And they end up becoming recurring characters in Tress's story as kind of like... They're like comic relief kind of characters a little bit that are still a little opposing. So in Throne's Chapter 1 or Chapter 2 or something, is it Throne? Casti. In Casti's Chapter 2, you come across this woman who has hired Mick and Mac. It's probably not the same Mick and Mac, just because this takes place hundreds of years after the first game. What's probably more likely is what this article writer, Talus, what Talus is saying is that it's probably just a nod to like Biggs and Wedge from Final Fantasy franchises. There's always characters that have similar names, like Sid, for example. Yeah, so it's probably just Octopath's version of Biggs and Wedge. From the far reaches of hell. I didn't know this, but apparently Galdera is a secret optional boss in Octopath Traveler 2. And you have to get the book From the Far Reaches of Hell in Octopath Traveler 2. And then you have to go to the question mark aisle to fight Galdera, which is super cool. Galdera is the super secret boss fight from the first game. That is like the equivalent of V-Day type deal. So this is really cool. I have yet to do this side quest, but I will be after this video. So this is really cool. Skystones. So Skystones are an item that Tressa tries to sell in one of her chapters in Octopath Traveler. And you can just find them lying around in the second game. That's all that is. Remastered music tracks is just music from the first game, which is cool. A smaller pantheon. So in the first game, or in both games, you have these 8 gods, right? You have Aber, you have, actually there might be a whole list here. Okay, no. But you have Aelfric, you have Aber, you have all the gods of the main 8 classes, and then in the first game, then you have Galdera, right? This game seems to replace Galdera with V-Day, so there's a total of 9 gods, right? But then you have the extra 4 from the first game. From the first game, you have Balagar, the Runeblade, Dracing, the Archmagus, Starora, the Starseer, and Winhild, the Warbringer. And these are actual gods that you have to beat in the first game in order to get the secret classes. Those don't exist in Octopath Traveler 2. There's no extra gods tied to the secret classes. You can kind of make the case for the Conjurer and the Arcanist, but the Inventor and the Arms Master classes you just find. So that is a little weird. So yeah, but there's a smaller pantheon. They have 8 of the same gods, but Octopath Traveler, the first game, has 13, with the extra 4, these guys, and Galdera. And in Octopath Traveler 2, you have the original 8 plus V-Day. So, yeah. And then there's just like some small other stuff. So you can find like maps of Orstera around. So like this is Orstera right here. This is the main land from the first game. And then you can see the original 8 in this picture right here. It's really bad quality. Let me see if I can zoom in. But I know this picture too. So this picture right here, right there, is of all 8 chapters, or all 8 travelers from the first game. And it is this picture. Traveler. Oh, it's that one right there. Hold on. Here. I'm pretty sure it's this one. It looks a lot like it. If my thing doesn't want to be so slow. Open new image. There we go. Oh wow, that's really bad quality as well. But yeah, so you have Cyrus, Ophelia, Alphen, Tressa, Honnet, Primrose, Therion, Ulbrich. So we go here. I guess it is different, because that looks like Cyrus right there, and Ulbrich is back there. Primrose is there in the middle. Tressa is there right there with her hat. Oh, these might be their character sprites. These might not be, like, actual portraits. Huh. But, yeah. So you can see the characters there, or at least some. Yeah, I think it's their character sprites, because Tressa looks really tiny there, and you can see the feather on her hat. I thought it was this picture, but it's not. So, but, yep. Okay, well, that's all the story stuff. What, 2 hours? Did I get 2 hours? Have I hit 2 hours yet? 2 hours, 10 minutes. Wow. So, overall, I loved this game. As I mentioned with the gameplay, there's a handful of quality of life improvements that the franchise just can't do without. Like, even going back and playing the original, I think I'll just be too like, whoa, this is... it's not that it feels dated. That's the wrong way to put it. It's just like so much of the small, improved upon things from the second game, they really knocked it out of the park. And it's just, you can't kind of do without them. You know, it's like Pokemon's done the same thing too. Like with natures and abilities and with the physical special split. It's hard to imagine Pokemon without those changes now. And Octopath 2 is the same way with Octopath 1. Oh, wait a minute! I forgot about the super secret thing that I was going to tell you about with the 8 hidden characters. So, I'm going to do that real quick, and then I'll continue my in review. These secret characters here, of the Moonshade Order, okay, that are doing the bad, right? These characters, let me pull up a text edit document. Okay, right? So let's start this, okay? Wait, hold on, let me find it on my other monitor real quick. Alright, here we go. Alright, so we have Kazan, whose real name is Aboro. Okay? And Aboro is Kazan, and he's a part of Hikari's story. Okay? Then we have Claude, who's a part of Throne's story. So we'll do, he was Hikari's advisor, and Claude is Throne's father. I got another text, but I'm not going to worry about it. Then we have Tansy, who is in Agnia's story, Agnia's friend. Okay? Then we have Ori. Wait, what just happened? I'm lagging! I'm lagging! On land, too. How sad. Bro, come on. I am big braining here. You gotta be kidding me. It crashed. It crashed. Nah, we doing this again. Okay. Oboro. Hikari's advisor. Claude. Throne's father. Tansy. Agnia's friend. Ori. Partitio's newspaper fan. Petrichor. Ochet's dark hunter. Arcanet, Timonos' friend. Trousseau. Casty's villain, I guess. And then Harvey. Oswald's villain. Look at this. So, in the first game, Octopath, Ophelia, Cyrus, Tressa, all the way to Haunted, right? The second game, the journal in the actual OctopathTraveler 2 game wants you to start with Ochette. The collector's edition box wants you to start with Oswald instead, and you should. Here's why, okay? The villains of all of their stories also spells Octopath, but only in this specific order. If you start with Oswald, Harvey, Casty, Trousseau, Timonos' Arcanet, and so on, right? If you do their villains backwards, Oboro, because you start with Hikari, because Hikari is H at the end of Octopath. Oboro, Claude, Tansy, Ori, Petrichor, Arcanet, Trousseau, Harvey. It spells Octopath the same way that their respective villains or heroes do backwards. Oswald with Harvey, Casty with Trousseau, Timonos with Arcanet, Ochette with Petrichor, Particio with Ori, Agnia with Tansy, Throne with Claude, and Hikari with Oboro. This is like very basic thematic stuff, but it's just so cool that they take the time to think about it, right? Like, they didn't have to do that. But that's why I thought that there were evil counterparts. Because you have the Darkblood staff, sword, and bow. And I was like, wait a minute. The main villain, or the plot twist villain, from all of their stories that have the bow, staff, and sword, are with that character. So, Hikari uses a sword. Oboro is his plot twist villain character, Oboro, who gets the sword, right? The Dark Hunter has the bow. Ochette uses a bow. Timonos has a staff, because he's the cleric. Arcanet uses the Darkblood staff. So that's why I was like, oh my god, they're going to have evil counterparts to all of them. I was half right. They're not evil counterparts, but they are backwards. And there are 8 of them that spell Octopath 2. That's so cool. The only one that's off is this person here on Reddit included Caldina, which is with a K, right? So that's not wrong. It's just Caldina and Arcanet are both in Timonos' story. And between the two of them, Arcanet is the more dangerous one. She's the one who's actually a part of the Moonshade Order, who is controlling everything. Caldina's just a pawn. So you can drop Caldina, so you can drop the K. You have this. Mind blown. Really stupid, because again, it's just theme stuff. Like, it's just thematics. It's not actually important to the integral plot of the story. But it's still so stinking cool. I'm so glad that I had 2 hours and 30 minutes to talk about this with you guys. Because I just beat the game, and I'm like, oh my god, this is so cool. This is why I loved the first game so much, was because of just thematic stuff like this. Not only is the game both games, an absolute love letter to JRPG fans, of classic and modern both. But it's stunningly gorgeous, with old school pixel art. The music is incredible. The gameplay is innovative, and it's, what's the word, like, involving. Yeah, the story in both games is really, really good. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. So, anyways, that was the side character thing that I wanted to show you about, but I'm going to continue my review. So, gameplay-wise, again, quality of life stuff, absolutely fantastic. Takes everything that was good about the first game and makes it great here. Like, not that the first game, again, is bad, it's just, you can't imagine going back. You just can't. story-wise is pretty good. I think that as far as this story goes, I feel like it's a little more misconstrued. Like, it's a little looser than the first game. The first game, with the secret story, you had... I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, I'm going to copy this and put it in my group chat with other people. There we go. Yeah, so you have Grant, who's an apothecary that heals Alvin. Grant has Journal that Tressa gets. Grant becomes Beast from Haunted Story. So, and you can see these underlining things here from one singular character. You don't really have to worry about like 8 different characters all kind of doing their same thing here. It's just, it's more condensed, which I thought was really, really cool. But this whole thing that they've got going on here with the 8 extra characters in the background from the Moonshade Order is still really neat. Like, it's still really cool, especially since they spell Octopath backwards. I thought was really cool too. But yeah, so that's about it. I was interrupted as I was explaining that, so that's why my hype kind of died down a little bit. But yeah, I thought that this was super cool. That the main villains, or at least like the twist villains, or whatever, like the most primary antagonistic force of that person and how they apply to the overall narrative, spells Octopath in the backwards order. But it doesn't work if you have Ochette first. Oswald has to be first. Just like my little box thingy has. Oswald first, wherever he is. Is that him? Yeah, Oswald first. Boom. Take that. I actually found the same problem with the first game, because when doing this video a little bit and like in between breaks at work, I googled like the order of the characters and stuff from the first game, and I saw that a handful of people were putting Ulbrich first, which I thought was a little weird, since it was kind of, I feel like, clearly Ophelia, but maybe it's because Ulbrich was in the demo or something. I don't know. But yeah, so I thought that this was really cool, because this has to be intentional. It's got to be, right? Like, there's no way it's not. Yeah, so anyways, guys, I think that's it. I'm glad I got to talk about this little twist thing. We got to talk about the whole ending. We talked about the gameplay. We talked about the individual standalone stories and how they relate to this. So I want to make a video at some point comparing the travelers from both games and making like a ranking. That would be like a typical top 10 like video. It'll be top 16 because there's 16 travelers. And yeah, so I want to do that next at some point, and just kind of like, you know, get my 2 cents on which stories I think are the best. I don't know on what scales I would do that. I would probably do it something along the lines of like what the character brings to the gameplay, the character's personality and characteristics, and then how their individual stories stand on their own. Because how they relate to like the overall post-game narrative is important. But if I'm going to be ranking them individually, then I think I need to take a look at their stories individually as well. So, yeah. Anyways, guys, thanks again for watching. I know that this was a super long ride, but I'm so glad I got to do it with all of you. Yeah, please let me know in the comments what you guys think about the game, or the video, or both. But anyways, this is Jake, logging out. Peace.